So the RX 9070 launched along with the 9070 XT on March 6th, and while they all sold out, the price increase on the XT has a lot of people looking at the RX 9070, which is only 12% slower, as a suitable alternative given that the prices are not going up very much on the 9070 so far. So today we're going to take a look at every single 9070 out there, including I'll go over the models that have not increased their prices very much and might be the best deals out there. So all this data is listed down in the video description in this spreadsheet, which is linked there. And of course, we already did this for the 9070 XT. I'll leave a link to that video in the video description along with that spreadsheet as well. But basically, we're going to put in the boost clock, the game clock, the total graphics power TGP, and then all the physical statistics that we're going to go over today, including links for both the retailers as well as the product pages for all these, and any other notes like super cooling features and things like that. This video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows licenses and that terrible Activate Windows watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key and get a Windows 10 or 11 OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 30% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom! Windows is fully licensed for a crazy low price. And they have Microsoft Office licenses too. Use the links in the video description. Now, every time there's a launch like this, there's always some inconsistent information that comes out, even from the retailers themselves or the manufacturers. So if you see anything in the spreadsheet, leave a note down in the comments. We'll get it fixed in real time on the spreadsheet. If you're wondering what the difference is between the 9070 and 9070 XT in terms of performance, looking at TechSpot's RX 9070 review, link down in the video description, you can see at 1440p across a wide 18 game average, it's about 10% faster at 1440p, and then at 4K, the 9070 XT, about 15% faster. So that's your average margin. I'd say roughly 12% depending on your resolution. So just like with the 9070 XT, not all 9070s are created equally. Most will come with the stock spec, however, a lot of them are going to come with two different OC specs, either the max OC spec or a custom OC spec that's put on by individual vendors. We will, of course, go over the clocks for each and every individual model. The max OC is pretty much the most common out there. The increase is a 7.1% increase. It raises the boost clock to 2700 megahertz and the game clock to 2210 megahertz. So basically about 7% on both those. And the total board power only goes up by about 25 watts. It's 11% power. That's pretty good from an overclocking standpoint. Of course, you can manually overclock or even undervolt your GPU using the Radeon driver software. But if you don't want to go through that, these are the specs that will work out of the box. We're going to start off with cards that have held their value the best between the initial launch and the subsequent restocks. That means the prices increased the least. Can't say that will continue to be the case, but so far, starting with ASRock, they have had a pretty good track record here. Let's start off with the RX 9070 Steel Legend 16 gigabyte. Now this is an overclocked model, so 2700 megahertz on the boost clock, 2210 megahertz on the game clock at 245 watt TGP. Obviously, this is an all-white card, and I'm using air quotes here because it does have this gray panel here. This was not present in previous generations. It used to be just all white all the way through, and obviously the 3 ARGB fans, and then it's got ARGB on the top logo as well. I still think it looks absolutely great as an all-white card, you know, again, in air quotes. The backplate is also all white. It looks super nice. It's got the air pass-through here. One thing to note about ASRock and some of the other AMD board vendors is that they have gone ahead and added ARGB headers to a number of these cards. We'll call it on the other cards as well. That means you do not have to download ASRock's ARGB software, right, Polychrome software, in order to control the RGB or the ARGB on the GPU. You can take a standard 3-pin 5-volt cable and plug it into your motherboard header, or you could daisy chain it, do whatever you want with it. And you can control it using the motherboard software. So 2 thumbs up there. Absolutely love that. Get rid of all that bloat. Most of these cards, by the way, are going to have 2 8-pin power adapters. They're not going to use 3, like we saw in a lot of the 9070 XTs. And only one of them, we'll get to that later, is going to use the 12-volt high power cable. Again, I don't know why they made that decision, but this is not one of them. This is going to use 2 8-pins. In terms of the rear outputs, it's got 3 DisplayPort 2.1A and 1 HDMI 2.1B. Its overall length, 298 millimeters, so it's one of the shorter cards, and it's just under 3 slots in width at 2.9 slot. Looks like a pretty good card. Looks like it is holding its value right around $650. All right, let's move over to ASRock's 9070 Challenger. This is intended to be a base spec model. So the boost clock, 2520 megahertz on it. The game clock, 2070 megahertz. The total board power is going to be, of course, 220 watts. Not that different from the Steel Legend in terms of physical specifications. A little bit shorter, so it's 290 millimeters in length, and a little narrower. It's 2.6 slots wide, so almost that magical 2.5 slot wide card out there. I think it's going to fit in most builds. All black, 3 fans. The only ARGB on this is, of course, that light bar right there. I will say on this one, I thought that initially it was going to have the ARGB header on it. However, for whatever reason, ASRock has decided not to put it on this card. Maybe that's part of why it's a MSRP or was, tagged as an MSRP model. You can, of course, just turn the ARGB on or off, and you can, of course, control the ARGB using ASRock's Polychrome software. 2 8-pin power connectors on this, and again, just like the Steel Legend, 3 DisplayPort out and 1 HDMI on it. Overall, it looks like a pretty good card if you're looking for something that's basically going to be one of the cheapest 9070s out there. All right, let's move over to the ASUS TUF Gaming RX 9070 OC, and the pricing on this right now is pretty insane. So I'm just going to say this out loud. If you find a model like this where it's more expensive to buy this than it is a 9070 XT, as long as both are available, obviously, get the 9070 XT. You're going to get way more performance out of it. It's clocked higher. It's got more compute units on it. It's going to just give you more performance. That being said, the 9070, let's go through the specs really quick. It's not that different than the 9070 XT, quite honestly, the 9070 OC. Let's first of all talk about the OC because it's not the max OC. It's a custom OC. So it's 2670 megahertz. So it's 30 megahertz lower than the max OC, and then 2190 megahertz on the game clock, which if I do the math really quick, it's 20 megahertz lower on the game clock. I'm assuming this is at a 220 watt TGP, but I can't find it listed anywhere. Certainly it's not going to be at the 245 one, otherwise they would have gone all the way up. In terms of the look of the card, obviously it's got that kind of gray, cool look to it. Will go in any of the black builds or any kind of the darker color builds out there. The only ARGB on it is this logo here. It's got a couple of lines on the side, and then there's these lines right here. So that's really the only ARGB on the card. In terms of the power adapters, it's 2 8-pins, pretty standard for most of these 9070 XTs. In terms of the rear panel outputs, you're going to get 3 DisplayPort 2.1 and you're going to get 1 HDMI 2.1 on it. Let's talk about the specifications in terms of the length and the width, because this is a bigger card for a 9070. So it's 330 millimeters in length and it's 3 slots in width. The width isn't that bad. The length, you just make sure it's going to fit inside your case out there. One thing I will say about both of the ASUS cards is they're going to use the PTM 7950 thermal interface. So it's a phase changing thermal interface. It does help with thermals on it. Obviously, this is one of the highest end 9070 cards out there. Let's jump over to the ASUS Prime RX 9070 OC next. This is one with another custom overclock on it. This is going to be much closer, however, to the base spec, the stock specifications for the cards. So let's quickly go through the clocks here. 2610 megahertz on the boost clock. That is up about 90 megahertz from the stock setting. And then 2140 megahertz on the game clock. That's up about 70 megahertz. I'm assuming they're doing that within the same 220 watt TGP because they don't list a TGP. That would be nice information. As soon as I do get that confirmed, we will, of course, update the spreadsheet with that information. Let's talk about the card itself in terms of the look. They're going with the same look that they're going with the new ASUS TUF B850 motherboards, which is that kind of matte black with that blocky white lettering. I got to tell you, I like it a lot, ASUS. Just keep doing that. I like it a lot. This card is 2.5 slots in total width on it, 312 millimeters in length. So it's going to fit probably in most cases out there, but obviously check your case because it's not one of the shortest ones out there. And it's using the same phase changing GPU thermal pad, the PTM 7950 thermal interface on it. So 2 thumbs up there. In terms of rear outputs, it's got 3 DisplayPort 2.1, 1 HDMI 2.1. Looking at the card overall, it's just very black, very matte black on it. So if this is the kind of styling that you're looking for with that 2 8-pin adapter right here, maybe this is the one you pick up instead. I just want to add, if you're getting value out of this video, it took a ton of time to get all these details together. So do please give it a like. It really does make a difference for the algorithm. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content as well. All right, let's jump over to the Gigabyte RX 9070 gaming OC. There's also a gaming non-OC version that's identical in all specs except for the clocks, which is going to use the stock specification. So we'll take a look at the gaming OC and just know that the gaming is identical. And I will also say there's no web page for the gaming, it's just the gaming OC. So let's start off with the clock specifications. The gaming OC is going to be a max overclock version. Boost clock 2700 megahertz on the boost clock, game clock 2210 megahertz at 245 watt TGP. Obviously, the non-OC is going to be the stock settings. While we're here, let's take a look at the length. 288 millimeters. It's one of the shorter cards out there that is 3 fans. In fact, I think it's the shortest. Maybe the Reaper's a little bit shorter. And then it's 2.5 slots in width. So 2 thumbs up. It's actually pretty compact. Very similar to the 9070 XT. I will say, though, that there are some differences from the 9070 XT version of it. That uses a vapor chamber. This, we're going to go with a copper heat plate instead. Nothing wrong with that, just maybe not as great as the vapor chamber. Then again, this card is not clocked up anywhere near high as the 9070 XT, so it's entirely possible it doesn't really need that either. Other great features I really wanted to point out on this card, I probably missed this on the 9070 XT. I absolutely love this concept, Gigabyte. Keep doing this. This needs to be on every motherboard. What am I talking about? I'm talking about LED power indicators for your PCIe power pin cables, the 2 8-pin cables on there, so that they light up when it has power. This is genius. This needs to be on motherboards, everything where you plug cables into. It needs to have a little tiny itty bitty light that troubleshoots it, because I can't tell you how many times you're sitting there, you're not getting a signal. Does it have power? Does it not have power? Is my cable bad? I don't know. This would have saved me so much time, especially if it were also on the motherboard and the PSU side. I just want to start seeing these things everywhere. This is a genius idea, and I just want to use my 30 seconds here and pump this one up. In terms of the rest of the card, it's got 2 DisplayPort 2.1, 2 HDMI 2.1. This is what the back of the card looks like. Pretty tasteful in terms of just kind of a matte black card. I actually quite like the design. I like these kind of cut off corners here, the edges as well. I like this card quite a bit. It has been one of the better priced ones as well. All right, let's jump in the Sapphire Nitro Plus RX 9070. Now, this is going to be a max boost, so it's going to be 2700 megahertz on the boost clock, and it's going to be 2210 megahertz on the game clock at 245 watt TGP. So this is the max OC model. I will say this tends to be, like the ASUS Tough Gaming, kind of massively overpriced. Don't overspend on a 9070 OC version where you could have gotten a base spec 9070 XT, because that's going to be the faster card. It's the 9070 XT base spec rather than any of the OC 9070 versions. The other thing about this card, which I do like quite a bit, is that it is using the 12 volt high power cable that you often associate with NVIDIA GPUs. And the reason they're doing it, although I will say it does have an adapter so you can plug in 8-pin power cables with it, but you still have to plug the adapter, which have that 12 volt high power cable end on it, into the card right here. And the issue with these, obviously, is when it bends too much, it can cause issues here. If you want to see how they do this, they offer a demonstration right here, which I honestly don't think it looks really good, that they're bending the cable that much right there. It's going to be put a lot of tension on the card. The other thing is it is going to come out the bottom of the card, so then you're going to have to bend it back again, and I don't understand why we're trying to bend the cable that much here. Maybe they figured this out. Maybe this is the perfect amount of bend for this, but this cable is going to have to then bend when it hits the motherboard here, so you're going to have to do something about it there. Also does have the ARGB connection cable, so you can offload it to the motherboard, so you don't have to download Sapphire's ARGB software to control your GPU. You can use the motherboard software for two thumbs up there. Let's talk about the rest of the card. In terms of the specifications, this card is pretty big, 331 millimeters in length, 3.3 slots in width. One of the biggest 9070s out there. It has this really cool grill on the top and a light bar. That's where your ARGB is coming in from. 2 DisplayPort and 2 HDMI ports on it. One thing to add about all the Sapphire RX 9070s and 9070 XTs is that they do use the PTM 7950 phase changing material, so 2 thumbs up there on the cooling. If you're looking for like that kind of super ultra card, for whatever reason you don't want to buy a 9070 XT, or maybe the price eventually comes down on this, this is probably the one you'll end up getting. All right, next up is this Sapphire Pure. Now this is an all white card that people absolutely go crazy for. And I think they've done a really good job with this one as well. Let's go through it. Number one, it's a max OC card, so that's great. 2700 megahertz on the boost clock, and 2210 on the game clock, along with a 245 watt TGP. Let's talk about the other physical specifications. Good news is no 12 volt high power cable on this one. It's two 8-pins. They plug in right here, and it does have a cable slot for the ARGB header on it right here. And you can actually run that out the bottom, which I think is really smart for a small cable like that, and then plug that in your motherboard. That way you offload the ARGB control to whatever software you want to use, and you don't have to use Sapphire software instead. In terms of the ARGB, because I know for people who like the white cards, they're always interested in this. The only ARGB element I can see is this light bar right here. It's the Sapphire logo, so that's pretty tasteful. In terms of the back plate on it, again, it's really nice, all white card. People tend to really like this particular model. Let's talk about its specifications now. In terms of the length, we got 320 millimeters and then 3.1 slots wide. So it's not that big, but it's not one of the smallest cards out there either. Very similar to the Nitro Plus. It's got 2 DisplayPort 2.1, 2 HDMI 2.1 on it. This is a card that people really do anticipate, and we will probably see it command quite a price premium. Let's jump into the Sapphire Pulse RX 9070. Yes, we did not forget it this time. If you watched our 9070 XT video, for whatever reason, it didn't make it into the video even though we filmed it. I did add a link and I uploaded the footage later, so you can go back onto that spreadsheet or in that video, and there's a link to it there. This is the only 2-fan card that I can find with a manufacturer that sells to the US. This is a base spec card as well. So this is a 2520 megahertz on the boost clock, 2070 megahertz on the game clock. So you're looking at that 220 watt TGP. Now these cards do not have any ARGB on them, so you don't have to worry about the ARGB, and it's gonna be 2 8-pin power cables on them as well, and they're gonna attach right here at the top. It's a nice looking card. It's got a little bit of red styling on it, white blocky lettering, and then it's mostly kind of matte black, kind of almost a little bit on the gray side to it. It's also pretty tight. It's 280 millimeters in length. It is the shortest card out there. Now, obviously it's a 2-fan card. You would expect that. 2.6 slots in width. So it's not that kind of mythical 2 or 2.5 slots, but it's pretty close to one of the most compact cards out there. It's going to have 2 DisplayPort out and 2 HDMI out on it. Now, in terms of the pricing, I expected this to be closer to MSRP. It does look like this card is one of the more popular ones out there, so the price has come up quite a bit more, but we'll have to wait and see where the pricing settles out. Let's jump to the PowerColor Red Devil RX 9070. First of all, let's start off with the specs. This is a full TGP, full max OC card, so it's going to be 2700 megahertz on the boost clock, 2210 megahertz on the game clock, at a full 245 watt TGP. It is a big card, 340 millimeters in length and 3.5 slots wide. So again, one of the larger cards out there, if not almost the largest card out there. It does use the PTM 7950 thermal interface on it, and it does have that 3-pin 5-volt ARGB header that you can plug in to offload the ARGB onto your motherboard, controlling software instead, which I absolutely love. Let's talk about the aesthetic features, because I really feel like that's what people are going to buy this card for. So not only does it have that big hellstone, ruby stone, dragon, so whatever you want to call this thing at the end, that looks pretty sick when it's all lit up. It's also got ARGB on the back here, on the back panel, and it's got a little bit of ARGB on the front. It's just, I believe, these 2 lights here, not much on the top. On the top, you've got the 2 8-pin power adapters on it. In terms of its rear output, it's got 3 DisplayPort 2.1, 1 HDMI 2.1 on it. Look, if you want kind of the Hellstone card, this is the one to get. Let's jump over to the PowerColor Hellhound RX 9070 OC model. And this is a custom OC. We'll get to the clocks in just a second. Let's quickly talk about this and the Spectral. There is no Spectral version of it announced right now. The Spectral is typically the all white that has identical specs. It's just all white instead. There was one for the XT. We went through that in our XT video. You can check that one out. I would be shocked if we didn't eventually get it, but for whatever reason, it's not coming right now. Let's jump through the specs on this one. Pretty interesting, actually. Not only is it a custom overclock, it's got some interesting dimensions to it as well. Closer to the stock than the Max OC. So we're gonna go to 2590 megahertz on the boost clock. So just up about, I think that's 70 megahertz. over stock, and then 2120 megahertz on the game clock. So that's what, 50 megahertz. So mildish overclock there. I'm assuming that they're going to do that at the 220 watt TGP profile on it. They don't list it, however, so that's just my assumption on it. In terms of the outputs, just like the Red Devil, 3 display ports, 1 HDMI 2.1. Let's talk about the specifications for this card. It's 2.1 slots wide, only 2.1, so it's almost that mythical 2 slots. The Reaper is 2. We'll get to that in a second. But it's 327 millimeters in length, so it is a little bit on the longer side of some of these cards. It does use the PTM 7950 thermal interface, just like the Red Devil does. Let's talk about the LED on this, because I think that might be confusing to folks. So it has LED, not ARGB. You can flip it off. There's a switch for it right here. I don't believe you can control it. It's just blue. So you get kind of a headlight thing. It will definitely provide some illumination to the case. And then the Hellhound's eye on the back of the card also lights up. Otherwise, the card completely matte black. There's the back plate on it. You can see how thin this card really is. This tends to be one of the more mid-range price cards. All right, let's jump over to the PowerColor Reaper, which I think those of you looking to build small form factors are absolutely gonna love, because despite the Sapphire Pulse having only 2 fans, this is actually, to me, the most compact of the cards out there. We'll go over the specs in just a second. This is a base specification, a stock specification, I should say, card. So it's going to be 2520 megahertz on the boost clock, 2070 megahertz on the game clock, and it's going to run at a 220 watt TGP. And in terms of the outputs, 3 display port, 1 HDMI, especially for those of you out there who are looking for a super small form factor card, let's talk about its dimensions, because they're crazy small. It is 289 millimeters in length. There's only 2 cards that are shorter than it, the Gigabyte Gaming and then the Sapphire Pulse, and they're not that much shorter, and it's only 2 slots in width. So this is the tightest card out there. Again, if you're looking to do an ITX build, mini ITX build, this is the first card I would look at, especially because it is one of the cheaper models out there. You're also going to be saving on that, because ITX builds do cost a little bit more. There's no RGB on this card. It's just the 2 8-pin power adapters that come in off the top. This is what the back plate looks like right here. It's kind of basic with just the pass-through on it. Matte black all around with a little bit of red just on the PowerColor logos here. Of course, when those fans are spinning, it'll just kind of be a reddish blur on it. If you're looking for like the cheapest RX 9070, this will probably be one of them. All right, let's jump to XFX's RX 9070 offerings here, because while it's not as complicated as their XT offerings where they had 11 different cards, magnetic fans, not magnetic fans, they still have 4 cards here that are largely identical, except one's a little smaller than the other one. That's really the only difference I can see, and one costs quite a bit more than the other ones. So let's jump through these. XFX cards so far during this launch, at least in the US, have been some of the more overpriced GPUs out there. Not so much seemingly with the 9070 models, at least at the pricing I'm looking at here, which is obviously sold out. When they come back into stock, we'll see how that changes. The Swift model is the kind of lower end model, and then the QuickSilver is supposed to be the higher end model. None of these come with the magnetic fans or any of the fancy stuff that the 9070 XT did. Right now, looking at the pricing, the white Swift card is $100 more just because it's white. It's the same card, it's just white. The black card is the MSRP card at $549, and then the QuickSilver cards are $649 and $669, kind of respectively. The white ones are obviously more. In terms of the clocks, they're both max OC cards. So this is 2700 megahertz on the boost clock, 2210 on the game clock. So that's 245 watt TGP on it. The main difference here, one is shorter than the other. So for the QuickSilver cards, both of them are 350 millimeters in length, whereas the Swift cards are only 325 in length. And then slightly narrower, the QuickSilver are 3.5 slots in width, while the Swift are 3.25 slots in width. So both of them are still kind of beefy cards out there. They both use 2 8-pin power connectors. They both have 3 DisplayPort out, 1 HDMI out as well. I can't really see aesthetically many other differences between these cards. If you can, let me know. I do know that they were advertising for the QuickSilver cards that it's got this kind of bendy area that they're going to allow you to 3D print color stripes to go on these, and they're apparently announcing that relatively soon. Otherwise, the Swift card looks very much similar to me. All the cards have a white LED logo. LED, you cannot change the color, so it's white LED right here. Other than that, there's not much difference between these cards other than the price. I do want to add that XFX has announced an RX 9070 XT dual fan model in the Chinese market. I'd be surprised if eventually a model like this for the 9070 didn't also make its way to like the US and other markets as well, as we've seen with previous series. Let's jump over to Acer's cards. They have not yet come to market as of the filming of this video. We are expecting them sometime soon, and Acer does tend to be the cheapest alternative out there, or one of the cheaper alternatives for a Radeon graphics card. They also do make Intel GPUs, just FYI. Let's start off with the Predator Bifrost OC. It appears there's no non-OC version of this. This is the RX 9070, not the XT version, and there's only limited information available right now, so we're just going to go through that. It is a max OC, so we got 2700 megahertz on the boost clock. They don't list the game clock, but we're going to just assume that it's that same 2210 megahertz because all of them are at 245 watt total board power. Thank you for at least supplying the total board power. Wish more folks would do that as well. In terms of what the card looks like, it's mostly renders at this point. It does look like we're going to get ARGB logo on the top of it here. It's going to be black with some silver in the middle of it. In terms of its rear outputs, they're showing that it's going to be 3 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI, along with 2 8-pin power adapters. We have no idea in terms of the length, the width, anything else on that specs, and I will update this as soon as we get more information. Let's jump over the ACER Nitro OC version. Again, the ACER Nitro tends to be among the cheapest out there. This is going to be a max OC card though, so we'll have to wait and see. 2700 megahertz on the game clock. Again, we're going to assume it's going to also include the 2210 megahertz on the game clock as well, because it's a 245 watt TGP. Why would they deviate from the kind of max OC spec? Just makes sense. This card, not that dissimilar from the Predator Bifrost. It used to be the Predator Bifrost had like a dual flow through. This card does not really look that different. Maybe it's just going to be a slightly cheaper version of it. Again, no dimensions on this card. It looks like it's got 2 8-pin power adapters, and then it's got the same as the Bifrost does, which is 3 DisplayPort and 1 HDMI on it. Let's quickly switch over to the non-OC version. So this is the Acer Nitro, not OC version. It's going to use the base spec, basically. It's 2520 megahertz on the boost clock, and then 2070 on the game clock, and then it's 220 watts of board power. Doesn't look like there's really any physical difference. So as soon as we have more information, we'll fill out in the spreadsheet. Finally, we've got Yeston. Yeston does the anime style GPUs. You can call the waifu GPUs, whatever you want to call them. You get the art on the back plate like this. Now for the 9070, we went over the 9070 XT versions in the other video. For the 9070, it looks like they're just doing, or they just announced the Sakura Atlantis version. No specs whatsoever on these GPUs, by the way, and no availability mentioned yet outside of the Chinese market, though they usually do eventually come to global markets. In terms of the GPU itself, from the picture here, it's got the 2 8-pin power adapter. It's got the backplate with all the artwork on it. It has LED, a white LED light on the top here, and the logo. Otherwise, can't really tell much, don't know much in terms of specs, size, anything like that. We will leave it all linked down in the spreadsheet as soon as it's announced for the US market. Remember, everything is linked down in the video description, including the spreadsheet, retail links and all, so check that out. And if you got value out of this video, please give it a like, because this was a huge amount of work, a ton amount of work. Mr. Bear really appreciates likes as well. And of course, subscribe for more cool PC content. And we'll catch you on the next one.